How does one become a CIA analyst? Do they call you after you place high on your SATs?
In some cases they do,
Okay.
and they recruit out of some of the Ivy League colleges. In my case, I had a friend who was in there. I didn't know it because he was undercover. Was encouraging me to put in an application, and his name was Dana. And I said, Dana, that's not going to happen. Not with my checkered and shaded college past. Drugs and alcohol and all. And he said, well, just try it anyway. And I said, okay. So I filled it out, 171, gave it to him, and just blew it off. That's the end of that. And I get a call. This is Kevin Shipp. Yes, this is Mr. X at the CIA. You've applied for employment here? I said, yeah. He goes, would you like to continue with your application process? And I said, sure.
How old were you at the time?
I was, let's see, at that time, I was 27 years old. And they said, okay, then we'll continue. Thank you. I said, okay, wait till they do my background investigation, talk to my college friends, Then I get phone calls from my buddies. Two guys in a suit knocked at our door. They were FBI and they're asking questions about you. And I'm like, well, surprised that didn't happen in college. But anyway, they weren't FBI. They were somebody else. So I knew that they were out there checking on me, and I was still convinced, nah, I'll never make it. And then I get another call, Kevin Shipp. We are still interested in your application. Would you like to come into CIA headquarters for an interview? I was like, okay. So I go to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, walk in there into the main building. They badge me with the visitor badge. I sit there. Lady in a business suit comes out. She goes, you Kevin Shipp? I said, yeah. She goes, follow me. So I go down this long corridor with combination locks on all the doors. And at the end is this one doorway that's open. And sitting behind the desk is this silver-haired guy up in this big desk. And this is back where you could smoke in CIA office buildings. And he's just chain smoking away. And he goes, Kevin, have a seat. So I sit in the chair, and of course, I sunk down, and so his desk is way up here. I'm like, okay, I know what's going on here. He goes, Kevin, I got one question for you. I said, yes, sir. He goes, you ever broken the law? And I'm like, okay, that's the end of this. I said, I'd become a Christian at that point. So I tried to tell the truth the best I could. I said, yes, sir, I have. He goes, well, why don't you tell me about it? So I went through this long litany of drug use and climbing to the top of radio towers and all this crazy stuff we did in college. And when I was done, I was like, oh, well, I told the truth. He takes a drag off his cigarette, blows out his nose, and he goes, I got no problem with that. You want to continue? I'm like, yeah. So anyway, went to the polygraph, and I did the same thing in the polygraph and told them all my.
Oh, wow. So they immediately then take you into a polygraph.
Well, it was about a month after that. They like you to stew.
So as they're watching you.
As they're watching you. So each interview was about almost 3 months apart for a total of 6 months.
Okay, and then one more question. What were you actually doing as your career at that time?
I was a starving biologist.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a biologist. My minor was in microbiology, and I decided I want to find a new career. That I'm not made to be in a laboratory, so that's why Dana had me turn in the application. And so they would call you, and they'd wait 3 months to kind of let you stew, And next call I get, Kevin Shipp. Yeah, this is Mrs. X. You have made it this far in your process. Would you like to come in for a polygraph test? And I said, okay. It said, come into headquarters such and such a time and date, and they'll send me to an outer building. They do these in an outer, non-discrete outer building. And they said, on such and such a date. So I walk in there, sit there with all these people that are in the chairs, just frozen, about to take their CIA polygraph. They called me back, and I sat down in the chair, and they wired me up with all the wires, the electrodermal plates and everything, and started asking me questions. And of course, the first one was, Kevin, you ever broken the law? And I was like, okay. And he was like, anything else? No. And then they get into drugs and they get into alcohol. And later on, at the end of my tour, I became a polygraph examiner. So I knew, much of it is trickery. It's not as much, the instrument is really important, but it's the skill of the examiner and how they ask questions, and they do it in a specific way. So they'll ask mundane questions, and then they'll hit you with the big one and see how you react to the big one, So anyway, I got out of there in 2 hours, which I understood later was a good thing, and got my call. You're hired, work for the CIA, report to CIA headquarters such and such a date for my big briefing, and I was in. You have no idea a lot of times what you're going to be doing until you get in there, which I certainly didn't.
So you were just shocked. Here you are, a biologist,
Yeah, and
dealing with test tubes and making no money. And now you're like, actually, now you work for the Central Intelligence Agency.
Yeah. And maybe they like my checkers
Married
and
at the
shaded
time?
No, I was married at the time. Let's see, I was 27, so I was married at the time. Yes, and of course, my wife couldn't know anything about it. Once I got in there and found out what I was going to do. You go through your first briefing. I wound up being one of these briefers, but everybody's sitting out there from secretaries to military liaison generals in this big audience, and then they tell them what the CIA is all about, and everybody goes, whoa, whoa, and they tell you how special you are, and you're the 2%, and that's when they start working on you. Nobody's like you, and we chose you because you're special, and that's part of how they mess with your mind and get you to kind of be super loyal and test you to see what you'll do later. So anyway, I went through that. Then I started in what was called their Security Protective Service. They had just instituted a brand new program where they would train federal law enforcement officers at FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And the CIA would bring them in, get them a clearance. They would be licensed federal police officers, and then they would do secret things for the police inside CIA headquarters and buildings. So I started there. And then
what sorts of secret things?
Well, protect the way the statement is, the Security Protective Service protects CIA personnel and facilities, and that means a lot, especially overseas. If you're protecting personnel overseas, you're involved in operations, live or die, which I wound up doing. And so within, 8 months, I was promoted to be a protective agent on the protective detail of William Casey when he was director of the CIA. And all the way up until he had his seizure and was taken to Georgetown University Hospital. And then I was one of the agents in the hot seat outside of his hospital room while he was terminally ill. And that's when Bob Woodward claims he got in, which is a fabrication, because we caught him and showed him the door. He never got in there.
Wow.
And it's in his book, Veil, Secret Wars of the CIA. It's a complete fabrication.
Wow.
Yeah. So then I went on to the counterespionage group. There was a mole in the CIA, and I was in a special unit searching for that mole inside the CIA. Then from there, I went and became a member of what would be the CIA's version of a Tier 1. They won't let me say the exact name of the detail. They want me to call it an anti-terrorism assault team. So we were sent overseas against the New People's Army terrorist group that were massacring police departments. They were surveilling embassy people. They'd killed a bunch of Marines, and we were sent over there to stop that from happening.
Which country? Are you allowed to say?
No.
Okay.
And so they said this is going to be a one-way mission. So we all took out life insurance, and I had a close call with a terminal illness when I was a kid, so I wasn't really afraid of much, So they asked for volunteers, and only a few raised their hands. And then we went through cut after cut after cut through this intense training with counter-assault team training and hostage training and all this stuff. And
so now you're learning to shoot, or had you already?
You're learning tactical shooting. We had to qualify in 5 different weapon systems. We went through really intense counterterrorism driver training where we're in the dark. We're driving down a track at 80 miles an hour with a car ramming us from behind, an instructor screaming obscenities right in our face, and we had to make a 90-degree turn and do it successfully, or we were off the team. So
okay, I want to pause here, because you are saying all this stuff like it's super casual, and now I feel like I'm listening to the audio of a James Bond flick. Okay, so because this is incredible. So they come to you, and you've got this counterterrorism team, and they ask who would like to volunteer for this. By the way, you might die.
Yeah.
Because you've said that sort of casually, whatever, I'll do that. Yeah. But they basically were like, take out some life insurance.
Absolutely.
You're married at the time.
Yes.
And you volunteer because you're a madman, I presume. But you did say also because you had dealt with the terminal illness when you were younger.
I mean, I wasn't afraid of dying,
Okay, so what was the terminal illness? What were you?
I was diagnosed with what's called bilateral hydronephrosis when I was 12 years old. And essentially both of my kidneys had burst. And I was just going to the bathroom, and nothing but blood was coming out. So they rushed me to Fairfax Hospital, and kidneys were gone. It was just a mass of blood, and they gave me 6 weeks to live. And my mom, who was an agnostic, had a friend named Sue Barton, wonderful lady, and she had a prayer group. And that little prayer group of ladies, believed that God still heals from the Bible, and so they prayed and prayed and prayed. I didn't know this. They prayed, and I remember I was in the hospital, and of course I was feeling horrible. I was in there for 30 days at that point, and I was their poster child, because I wasn't supposed to make it. And then all of a sudden I started just feeling healthy. For the first time in a long time. And I remember sitting up telling the nurse, open the window, let the sunshine come in. She's like, okay. They took me back down and x-rayed my sides, and both my kidneys were back. And this is in Fairfax County, records, Fairfax County Hospital, yeah. And so after that, I knew something really remarkable had happened. And after my college years, I finally was smart enough to find faith when I started looking into it, to get through my thick head. And then I became a very sincere Christian after that.